Hello, everybody. This is Gunjan Bagla, CEO of Amritt. And today I'm fortunate to have a discussion with my friend Daniel Krasenstein, who is the head of global supply chain for Procon Pacific. Welcome, Daniel.
Gunjan, very happy to be here. Thank you.
Great. So you have a truly international background, having worked in Indonesia, Mexico, the US, of course, and more recently in China, followed by India. And I'm very excited to be speaking about your recent experience with you today. So tell us a little bit about your business that you did in both China and India.
Sure. For the last 15 years, I've worked for a Chicago-based importer of polypropylene big bags, technically known as flexible intermediate bulk containers, FIBC, or super sacks. They're 1-ton bags. But essentially, polypropylene is the raw material, and it's extruded, woven, and manually stitched together to make these large 1 cubic meter bags, prevalent in the chemical, agricultural, mining, and construction industries. It's also known as industrial textiles. I'm sharing that with you because prior to 15 years ago, when I joined this company, I didn't know what this product was. They had to teach me and educate me.
Yeah.
But so basically, it's a big bag. And
A giant
prior
bag.
to a giant bag for powders, not for liquids.
Right.
And sometimes they put in a polyethylene liner if you want to make it airtight or protected against water resistant, if you will, or super clean. Some of our end users, they'll put in sugar or cooking flour or other edible products. So you have to be food grade clean, both in the manufacturing environment as well as the components used. So hygiene is very important.
Right. In fact, one of our clients, I think probably used your bags to ship pistachios all over the world, and they
It
had
could
the
very well
liner.
could be. Very well could be. We're probably the largest U.S. importer of this particular product.
Got it. Okay. Now, you lived in Shanghai for some years?
Yeah, I've lived in multiple countries. I'll walk you through that very quickly. When I graduated, my undergraduate in 1985, many moons ago, wow, almost 40 years ago, I moved to Taiwan straight out of college to learn Mandarin, and I lived there for 3 years. I started a small trading company making ballpoint pens and other promotional gift items. Then later, Sealand, now part of Maersk, a big container shipping line, hired me out of Taipei, moved me to Chicago until they found out I was a Jewish guy that spoke Mandarin Chinese. So they quickly moved me to the garment district in New York, where my skill set could be put to use in my
Yeah.
networking. After a couple of years, I was really pushing them to get me back to Asia because I missed living in Asia. So they posted me in Jakarta, Indonesia, where I ran 8 offices for Sealand there for a couple of years. Then I got hired away by a British international trading company called Inchcape, one of the big hongs. And they moved me to Shanghai, where I was running marketing and sales for a large trucking company, where we had 82 long haul Scania trucks doing the inbound haulage of containers from the port of Shanghai and Ningbo throughout central and eastern China. Volkswagen was one of our biggest customers inbound. Cars knocked down would come in from Germany, and we'd haul them to their manufacturing plants in Shanghai area. And outbound, we did all the consolidation work for H&M department stores and other clients. So our trucks were quite busy, and I was tasked with curtailing corruption and putting together a profitable pricing strategy and marketing strategy. That was a lot of fun. My next position, because I also speak the language of Spanish, I was hired by TMM Mexican Line, now part of CMA, CGM, CMA, CGM, and they moved me to Panama, Central America, where I ran line haul container services from Europe, Mediterranean, Asia into Central and South America, based in Panama. Then they moved me to headquarters, Mexico City, for a couple of years, where I had P&L responsibility. Then my pen company, which I started all the way back in 1985, started to be quite profitable. And I've been moonlighting all these years. It became so profitable, I had to go back into that full time. And by this time, let's see, we would have been around 2005. Our kids were getting older, and we wanted them to be fluent in Mandarin before they got older. So we decided to up and move to Shanghai in 2005. And there, we raised our kids through middle school and high school. I ran my pen company until 2008, when I joined this company, Procon Pacific, in the bulk bag manufacturing. And that's what I've been doing since. So that's my quick journey.
Got it. Okay. So tell us a little bit about what made you consider looking at India after this extensive experience in China, and how did that go?
Sure. The initial driver, frankly speaking, was cost. Um,
Are you saying
going,
you found Indian costs more attractive than Chinese cost?
oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Let me explain how I came to that conclusion. This was around 2016, 2017. We had been exclusively manufacturing in China, primarily in southern Jiangsu province and in eastern Shandong province, central, eastern, and northern China. And at the time, I witnessed labor costs go from around 250 US dollars per month per blue collar sewing worker. And they quickly elevated to around $700, more than doubled, almost tripled during
Yeah.
that time period, as China was putting in social benefits for its workers, including maternity rights, um, reduced working hours, as well as the EPA in China became a lot stronger, curtailing pollution both inside and outside the factory. As a result, overhead costs went up dramatically for these factories. So not only was labor costs going up, but overall, to make a profit for a factory, their costs went up. By the time we started shifting some production of our lower end bags, not the food grade ones initially, the differential, India was in the rough neighborhood of $225 to $250 a month labor versus China at this time is around $800. But we first experimented with Vietnam.
Yeah.
And what we learned quickly was Vietnam indeed was cheaper or lower labor cost than China, but not by that much, maybe about 20% cheaper.
Yeah.
So if China was around 800 a month, Vietnam was in the 650 per month range, where India was down in the 225, 250 range. Again, this is around 8 years ago, give or take.
Sure.
China continued to increase with forecasts of increased labor costs going up. And this is all pre-Trump, so it had nothing to do with U.S.-China tension. It was pure cost-driven for manufacturing. When I got to India to start exploring who to do business with, what I realized very quickly was India had quite a lot of experience in this particular niche industry, but not so much for the U.S. market, more for the European market.
Right.
India was already a key supplier, as was Turkey for the European market, where the U.S. was heavily reliant on China.
Yeah.
And a little bit from Turkey as well. So based on labor costs being much less expensive, and if you look at the finished cost of our product, let's say an average bulk bag cost, FOB value, for argument's sake, let's say $7 per bag.
Yeah.
Labor constitutes about 50% of that cost, labor and overhead, whereas raw materials another 50%. So you can see that's considered a labor-intensive manufactured product. So that labor cost differential was critical for us, just to not lose market share versus our competitors who were also starting to experiment with India for the US market.
Got it.
So as I started meeting factories in India, one of the first things I realized was the importance of clustering. What do I mean by clustering? It's a key term in global supply chain management. Find out where your suppliers upstream are sourcing their raw materials. In this case, Reliance is a very large refiner of polypropylene in India. So wherever they are and wherever they're supplying, there tends to be their customers grouped in a city. And in our case, we found that Ahmedabad in the state of Gujarat and Indore right nearby were two large areas where a lot of manufacturers were located. So although we did do some manufacturing in Calcutta and in Chennai and in Mysore and Karnataka, primarily we focused on Ahmedabad. And the advantages of that clustering became evident very quickly. On my buying trips, which were 4 to 5 times a year, I could land in the Ahmedabad airport and within 5 days be able to visit 10 suppliers.
Right.
Whereas if I was buying from all over India, and India is gigantic,
yes,
both geographically and multicultural, so many different ports and logistics variations. What I learned quickly with my background in logistics was how wonderful the port of Mundra is in Western Gujarat. Mm. And alternatively, if I'm sourcing not too far from there in Baroda or Vadodara or further down in Surat or Silvassa, that the port of Nahar Shiva, the various terminals there are also very efficient. Mm-hmm. So I found out I had 2 world-class ports between Mundra and Nahar Shiva. I had plenty of factories with a lot of experience in that cluster area, that crescent, going from Mumbai up through Savasta and Surat, up to Baroda to Ahmedabad, and all the way over to Kandla.
Yeah.
And I quickly determined I didn't need to keep buying from far out places in India, in West Bengal or Tamil Nadu or in Karnataka. I could concentrate in where the clusters were more efficient. Plenty of labor and much more of a business mindset and a lot of experience. The final thing to answer your question about why India and my first experiences was a term commonly used now called friend shoring. So a lot of Americans, again, I'm very US focused because that's where our market is. And me being an American, I tend to look at things from a myopic point of view, is the term is onshoring, which means moving production back from China, for example, to the US for manufacturing. It doesn't really create new US jobs.
Right.
It works when there's automation involved, right? Or 3D printing or other solutions where manufacturing in the US could be cost efficient.
Right.
There's nearshoring, and the best example of that would be Canada or Mexico. And Mexico's been the big winner in the last 5 years when people want to diversify against China. So nearshoring in this case would be Mexico or even the Caribbean. But the term I like to use for India is friend shoring. Because if you look at these two democracies who have a lot of common values and a lot of long-term alliances that work well with one another, India for sure is a natural friend of the United States and vice versa. So it just makes sense, other than the fact that most Indian suppliers I work with, other than Hindi and other dialects, all speak excellent English, sometimes better than my own. I learn words of English even from my Indian friends sometimes that I have to go back and open up my dictionary to improve my own English. But the point is,
you say that because on the Amritt website, we have a section called the Indian English Dictionary.
Right.
There are words in English you hear in India that you may not hear in the United States.
Absolutely true.
Yeah. So
one of my favorite words I learned in India, it's when an ocean carrier advances their port gate cutoff. That's called preponing as opposed to postponing. I never heard that word before. I learned that word in India.
Another one of my favorites is the word annexure. It simply means appendix to a document.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah.
Oh, there's many, many more. Like, for example, I'll try my level best. You know, some of these might come from Old English, but it's not a phrase commonly used in the United States, but it's all the time used in India. So I'm finding that I'm starting to adopt these phrases and use them in my own vocabulary now.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah.
I tell my British friends that not only is India taking over cricket, India will soon take over the English language.
Absolutely. By head count alone, right?
Now tell me, what surprised you the most? Because you were very internationally savvy before you started dealing with India. What was your biggest surprise, good or bad?
I'd say to answer your question, I would say first off that the owners and the upper level management of my main Indian suppliers, how well educated they are. I would say 90+% have master's degrees or higher from top US or British or Australian universities. And some of the top engineering degrees from Indian universities. I'm dealing with some smart, well-educated people, other than being wealthy, right? So, and they have a lot of experience. Quite often, either they from the ground up started the company, or they're typically their fathers did. It's a patriarchal society. The fathers did, and the fathers were astute enough to make their sons learn from the ground up. Don't give them the easy pass. Make them learn every different division of their company so that later one day when it's their turn to run it, they knew the business better than their employees. So nobody could BS them. So that was one thing, the experience and the education. And one thing I like a lot is the owners can be convinced to invest in technology, spend their own money to buy the best machinery. If I could prove to them through a Lean Six Sigma black belt type of analysis that spending money now will improve accuracy, reduce errors, and eliminate waste down the road, and will be in their best interest, especially as the labor cost will eventually rise in India, as it's starting to now. The more efficient they could be, the more competitive they can be. So the fact that I can have these intelligent conversations with the owners of the factories, or even one level down of their management level, was a very pleasant surprise.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah.
So let me put you in the position that you might be in a few days, perhaps, with all your international travels. You're on a flight going out of the US, and sitting next to you is an executive, a supply chain executive, it turns out, and they've never been to India before. And they ask you, hey, what are the top 2 or 3 tips that you would give me? I'm going to be landing in Mumbai or Delhi, in the next day. What should I brace myself for? What should I prepare?
First thing I would ask what industry they're in. Because if they're in my own industry, I'm going to tell them to go to a different country. I'm not going to give away the keys to the store. I mean, that's hard-earned tribal knowledge. I'm not going to share frivolously. But let's say it's a different industry, completely unrelated.
Yeah.
First thing I would say is do your homework, right? Don't go in there, just land in Mumbai or Delhi and walk around the streets and look for a factory. Obviously, that's just silly. I would also talk to your freight forwarders or your ocean carriers who are already doing business there and ask them, who in my industry is buying from whom, and what cities, which ports tend to have most traffic moving out of there? And I would do the same with your quality control inspection company, unless you're doing it yourself with your own buying office. Lean on your QC agent to say, hey, is anybody else buying this product that you're doing QC agent work with? Any good suppliers you'd recommend? So I would say do your homework beforehand. Second part to that question I answered earlier, and that was try to pick some clusters. Find out which geographic areas tend to be prevalent for your product. In my case, again, I mentioned Gujarat, especially in Ahmedabad and Baroda. A lot of factories are there. It just behooves me to spend a lot of time there. It's later on, it becomes much easier for me. I go to India 4 or 5 times a year. Yeah. So when I go, instead of going for 5 weeks, I've now can be very efficiently getting my trip done in 7 to 10 days because all of my suppliers are within driving distance of one another. So I could do 2 to 3 factories a day if I really need to. I'd rather do 1 or 2 a day, probably a breakfast and a whole morning with one factory, a lunch. Sometimes I'll skip lunch and do an afternoon and a dinner with a second factory. You notice that meals always play a big part of my visits. That's because Indians are in general, very sociable. And you get to know the managers, you get to know the owners of the factory much better over a meal than just at the factory. You get to learn each other's history, your families, and you build a rapport. Right. And it's a two-way street. I'm not your typical arrogant American buyer who says, I'm king, you have to do it my way. Not at all. Doing business internationally is like a roller coaster. Sometimes I'm in the catbird seat where my purchase order, people are begging me for my purchase order. Right. Sometimes it's the opposite way around, where the factories are full at capacity and they're picking and choosing which customer I want to work with. Right. So you have to be respectful. You have to build the relationships. So not only do they want to work with you because you have the buying volume and you have potential for growth, but they actually like you and you look at you as a friend and a long-term relationship is built. And when times are tough for either, you can call each other up on a WhatsApp or otherwise, and you ask for favors back and forth. And that's the true nature of a brotherhood type of relationship. So I think getting the point I was making with the clusters, the final answer to your question of advice I would give to Joe Schmo on the airplane, who's not in my industry, is when you start the first couple of years, you want to place some trial orders, right? You don't know if there's a good supplier. You don't know if you have good industry. Right. You have a good rapport, good chemistry. So you want to place some trial orders and see how it goes. Right. Nothing too risky. Make sure you have enough time, extra time, fat built into the schedule in case they screw something up. Make sure you have a little bit of margin built in case they say, oops, I made a pricing mistake, or you have to air freight a few pallets, but you're not going to lose your shirt on it. Make sure it's things that aren't time sensitive and find out which factories you play well with. Right. You have good chemistry and good rapport with. And geographically, the trucking and the ports and export customs work well. And the carriers have efficient service. That's another reason why I fell in love with Mundra and Nahar Shiva is they both have line haul direct non-transshipment service into New York. Right. Whilst the Suez Canal was open, 21, 22 days reliable. Yeah. These days, we're not going through the Suez, we're going under the Cape of Good Hope. but it's still 33, 35 days reliable because you don't have to deal with a transshipment.
Right.
I'm not a fan of transshipments. So that's one of the reasons why I shifted over to Western India is both Calcutta and Chennai are heavily reliant on transshipments over Colombo or Singapore.
Right.
And my experience has been not so great with the reliability on that.
Yeah.
So I'd say the first couple of years, experiment, with a broad machine gun, shoot purchase orders all over the place and see what works. By year 3, find out which suppliers you really didn't play well with, cut them out while you still have time and go find replacement ones. By year 4 and year 5, that's when you want to start consolidating, when you realize where your geographic clusters are, you realize which suppliers are good partners for you. That's when you really want to cut back, because then you could mutually help each other you want to become 30, 40, even 50%, hopefully not more than that, of their customer base. So your buying volume is not diluted, but you don't want to make that decision early. You want to wait until you can know who you play well with.
Are you able to say how many containers a month you're bringing in from India, approximately?
Oh, I think we're probably 60-40, so 120. Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah, something like that. We do around, let's see, 100, 120. Yeah, that's about right. I'd say we're probably 100 TEUs or 50 to maybe 120 TEUs per month.
Mm-hmm.
We ship only 40-foot high cubes, and we get about 44 to 48 pallets of our product in a 40-foot high cube.
Got it. Now let's turn to something more lighthearted. Well, what's your favorite Indian food?
I'm going to surprise you with this one. Gujarati thali.
Gujarati thali, all right, yes.
Again, because I go to Gujarat so often,
Yeah,
especially in Ahmedabad, majority of my suppliers and their staff are veg. They're vegetarian. They don't eat any meat of any kind.
right.
And so they take me to their favorite restaurants. And I was very pleasantly surprised, not only to find how clean and hygienic the restaurants were, but what a variety of food Gujarat has in the vegetarian genre. I wrote down notes for myself, just why I love the Gujarati thali so much. From peas to carrot pudding, cottage cheese, curry, eggplant, chili pickles. I go on and on. And so many different kind of crackers and breads. I leave so full when I leave a Gujarati thali meal. And I also feel like it was nutritious. And I don't leave with regrets. Yeah. When I'm in the US, I try not to eat fast food because I always have regrets after eating US fast food. Right. It just it wasn't good for you. It fills your stomach, but you don't feel right. You don't feel energetic.
Yeah.
When you eat a good Gujarati thali, you feel wonderful.
Yeah, totally. Okay. Now, I know you spend a lot of time in Gujarat. So let me ask you, outside of Gujarat and Ahmedabad, which is your favorite Indian city or Indian airport?
Ooh, I wasn't ready for that question. I got to think about that one real quick.
Yeah.
So outside of India or outside of Gujarat?
Outside of Gujarat, in India. Okay.
Well, I typically fly internationally from Los Angeles, where I'm presently based, to get to to get to Ahmedabad. I really have two choices because I'm on Star Alliance, and that means it's going to be Air India, United Airlines, or Lufthansa. What I learned over the years, LA and Ahmedabad are on the other sides of the earth from one another. I can't do it in less than 27 hours, one way.
Yeah.
So essentially, I take my choice, pick my poison, whether it's going to be Delhi or Mumbai.
Right.
And over the time, what I've learned is Lufthansa on a direct flight from LA to Frankfurt, and then Frankfurt into either Mumbai or Delhi is my most efficient routing.
Yeah.
The Lufthansa lounge in Frankfurt is extremely comfortable.
Yes.
The typical German, the airports are very efficient. It's very rarely late arrival or departure. Right. Even their customs works very quickly with you to get you from one terminal to the other. So I would say outside of India, Frankfurt is where I do most of my transiting. Right. Within India, it's got to be Mumbai or Delhi. I'm going to pick Mumbai as my favorite Indian airport because Mumbai is one of my favorite cities for R&R, rest and relaxation.
Yes.
I have friends who live in Mumbai. The restaurants and bars. I like alcohol, and you can certainly party in Mumbai. It has some of the finest restaurants, from Italian to Latino to Southeast Asian to Indian, obviously, cuisine, even good French restaurants. You can get great wines. The views are very scenic. It's a very cosmopolitan city, and Mumbai Airport is quite efficient. And there's a JW Marriott right next to the airport, so I typically just jump right into the hotel car, and I'm at the hotel within 20 minutes. It has great gyms, great pool, restaurants. So it's just a very comfortable acclimation point. Getting into Mumbai Airport, going right to the hotel, rest for probably 5 hours,
right,
until I get into a car and I head off to Silvassa. Yeah.
And within a few years, there will be a bullet train going from Mumbai to Ahmedabad.
Well, part of it's already finished.
Yes.
And I haven't taken it yet, but I've been told by several of my suppliers that on my next trip I can start taking it already. It's one of Modi's favorite projects. Yeah.
Yes. Earlier, before we got started talking, you mentioned that you are Jewish, and I wonder if you have looked into the history of the Sassoon family.
Of course.
Still a dock in Mumbai called the Sassoon Docks, and they came from Baghdad to India, and then
I'm very familiar.
India, they went to Shanghai. So
that's right.
It's the same journey.
Yeah. I've actually, Gunjan, I've actually given lectures on the history of Jewish migration to China, of which there were 5 different waves, going back to the Silk Route, where Jews over the Silk Route came into the city of Kaifeng in central China in Henan province, all the way until the 1890s, or even, 1860s, when the Sassoons and the Kadoris and the other Baghdadi Jewish merchants who were also dealing in Calcutta, and other parts of India and Madras, which is now Chennai, and elsewhere, they had outposts. And then they worked their way into Hong Kong and Macau and up to Shanghai. And then later, pre-war, actually in the 1910s, 1920s, Jews came in through northeastern China, helping Russia when they controlled Manchuria, build out the railroads there. Later, pre-Holocaust, a lot of Jews were able to escape Nazi Germany, Nazi Central Europe, into Shanghai, which was a free port at the time for people without passports. And more recently, in the 1980s, a lot of Jews who were involved in international trade or banking came back to Shanghai as the 5th wave. With respect to India and the Jewish population, I've been able to visit synagogues throughout India. Freedom of religion is one of the things I love about India. And Jews are very welcome in India. I feel very safe, and like Indians and Jews are like brothers from another mother, that we have a lot in common culturally. I've been to synagogues in Ahmedabad and Mumbai. And it's a wonderful thing about India that you have so many languages and religions and cultures, and everybody feels welcome.
Well, thank you so much. Any other parting thoughts that you would talk to a fellow American going to India for business?
I would say for sure, learn about cricket. If you have a chance, get yourself to a 2020 match. The IPL 2020 is just a blast. I find American baseball a little bit boring, but cricket is a little bit like baseball and running bases combined, but in 3-dimensional. And the fans are so passionate. I went to a Calcutta Knight Riders, Delhi Daredevils match about 4 or 5 years ago in Delhi. And I found it very interesting. They didn't serve alcohol inside the stadium. Because the Indian fans are so passionate. That's like throwing gasoline on fire. You don't want that combination.
Exactly.
And there were cheerleaders there. It was just a blast. So if you want to understand Indian culture and have things to talk about other than business with your Indian factory, learn a little bit about cricket, understand the local teams, who are the top players, and watch some Indian movies. Bollywood is just so much fun. And every time I watch an Indian movie, I just feel I've learned something. And I love the singing and dancing at the end. It's just a fun part of the culture.
Yeah, totally. Well, since both of you and I are in Los Angeles, the Olympics are going to be held in 2028, and cricket is going to be part of the Olympics. So look for maybe 500,000 or 1 million Indian tourists landing at LAX on that nonstop flight we talked about.
And within 4 years, you're going to see the U.S. even more competitive. So watch out, India. We already beat Pakistan. You're next on our target list.
Absolutely. Exactly. Well, thank you so much, Dan. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, and I look forward to staying in touch.
Gunjan, I appreciate it. It's been fun. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
Namaste.
Namaste.